He weak farmer and reincarnated as awakened dragons with extraordinary powers. An ancient dragon is killed by a human and is reborn as a normal man in a quiet village. On his deathbed, chained and wounded, he reflects that he never did anything to deserve such treatment from humans. At times, this dragon had even been an ally to them, but now he suffers at their hands without justification. Despite being severely injured, the creature breaks free from the chains in his mind. Perhaps none of it matters anymore, maybe his life has simply been too long, or maybe this is an unworthy end for such an ancient divine being who has lived since the era of the gods. At this point, he only wishes for the Reapers to take his soul to the underworld so he can rest forever. Then, his life ends. We are then thrown into a scene where a baby is born under peculiar circumstances. Magaru, who oversaw the birth, believes that this newborn possesses some extraordinary talent. While the parents are enchanted as their child opens his eyes, the mother names the child Dolan and introduces him to his older brother. Years later, Dolan has grown and is helping with household tasks such as gathering supplies. One day, while working, a girl calls him to come home. Her name is Eri, and she's worried about him. She asks if something is wrong because his mind seems to wander off with the sunset view. Dolan gently strokes her hair, assures her that everything is fine, and they walk back together. The two live in Varun, a small village on the northern border of the continental kingdom of Akrist. Aware that he was a millennial dragon in his past life, Dolan now lives as a typical peasant in this humble region whose sole industry is agriculture. Every day he goes to the fields, working hard to earn his daily bread. In this village, one is considered an adult at 15, the age when peasants are expected to live on their own. Dolan left his parents' house at 16, which is how old he is now. One day while fishing, a friend asks if tomorrow is the day he's going to investigate that swamp. Dolan confirms and adds that it's been a month since the lizards disappeared from the swamp, so something must be done. The friend argues that this should be the garrison's job, not his, but Dolan counters that Captain Varun and the others are busy protecting the village. The friend asks if he's sure he doesn't want company, but Dolan declines, saying he's just going to take a look. Just then, a fish bites the bait, and a battle ensues, but Dolan emerges victorious, returning to the village with a bucket full of fish. He is praised for the great catch, though a girl thought he'd be getting ready for tomorrow. He explains that he's been preparing little by little over the past few days, and that her help in persuading the village chief and the others was invaluable. She replies that since Dolan always helps with training, it's all good. Dolan asks if Melita and Albert are training now, and Melita confirms, mentioning they'll be holding a meeting about the next children's training. Albert advises Dolan to prioritize tomorrow's investigation. That evening, Dolan prepares a fish for dinner, reflecting on the many monsters and bandits surrounding Varun, but notes there aren't enough soldiers in the village to provide the same protection one would find in a city. It's expected that the peasants themselves help protect against threats. Meanwhile, Eri reminds Dolan that it's magic practice day, and the two head off for the session at the training grounds. Dolan points his hand at a straw target and shoots a blast of energy, destroying the target and putting on quite a show. Eri is thrilled by this, and Magaru praises Dolan's offensive magic for being flawless as always. Dolan credits his master's training, and she announces it's time to practice healing magic, a type of spell where the boy struggles. At dusk, the village chief introduces Dolan to a woman named Christina, a young noblewoman who will be staying in the village for some time. The old man asks Dolan to behave in front of her because of her status. Christina greets Dolan, and their eyes meet his intense blue and her pulsing red. As she walks away, he imagines she must be quite skilled.
力の断りを。エナジーボルト。ご指導のおかげです。
紹介しよう。こちらはクリスティーナ殿。
クリスティーナという。
くれぐれも粗相のないように。
よろしく頼む。
と言います。
Afterward, Dolan returns to gathering supplies, pondering the fact that in this village, there's always the risk of freezing to death in the winter and the unbearable heat in the summer. Reflecting on this, Dolan is shocked to learn that humans live in such a hostile environment. When he arrives home, he is greeted warmly by his brother Marco and their parents. Showing off the basket full of food earns him a smile from his mother, pleased with the abundance. Naturally, dinner was ready, and everyone ate with enthusiasm. Dolan's father comments that living alone may be relaxing but also lonely, so he advises his son to find a wife, as Dylan did. However, Dolan prefers to enjoy his single life a little longer. His brother brings up the swamp Dolan will visit tomorrow, and their mother worries about the dangers he might encounter. Dolan reassures her that he's only going to take a quick look. His father adds that Dolan is an adult and can make his own decisions as long as he returns safely to ease his mother's worries. To that, Dolan is confident nothing will go wrong, and he'll even have a great story to tell. The next morning finally arrives. Captain Varun still believes he should accompany the boy on this excursion, however Melita argues that it doesn't make sense since, if the monsters attack, the village would be left without its captain. Letitia offers a simple blessing from the goddess, while Magaru warns that her fortune reading showed a small hint of something bad on this journey, so Dolan should be careful. Eri made lunch for him and hands it over. With that, Dolan bids farewell to the village and sets off on his journey. As he walks toward his destination, he finds himself thinking about how the swamp lizards used to interact with the village of Virum from time to time. However, one day they simply stopped showing up. That's when Dolan volunteered to investigate the reason. Even though he had no idea what he might find, at the end of his journey he arrived at the swamp. He placed his hand in the water, and with some form of sensory technique, he realized that the lizards could no longer survive there because the power of the earth elementals had grown too strong, while the water elemental's power was weakening. He knew very well that Lady Maguru's divinations were usually spot on, so he had to stay alert. Speaking of which, he suddenly heard noises in the woods surrounding the swamp. To survive in a place like this, whatever it was had to be a pretty tough creature, so his attention sharpened even more. Then out of nowhere, a lamia appeared in front of him. In other words, someone who was half human, half snake. It was certainly not what Dolan expected to see, but since she had appeared, it confirmed the rumors the village had spread about this creature, rumors that all spoke of her unparalleled beauty. She asked if Dolan was alone, and he confirmed it. This seemed to relieve the lamia, though she wasn't quite sure how to proceed. Maybe she should try using those seductive moves her mother had taught her so many times. She gave it a shot, but in reality, it was far from being the kind of dance that would make someone feel attracted. In fact, it had quite the opposite effect. At the end of her awkward performance, the lamia assured him she wasn't there to fight, but a gigantic creature emerging from the swamp didn't seem to share that intention. When the massive monster threatened to crush the lamia with its hand, she could only scream and brace for death. However, Dolan sliced through the opponent's wrist, stopping the tragedy from unfolding. Naturally, he pulled the woman away to escape, but the monster was determined to block their way. The girl asked what that thing was. Without answering, Dolan covered her mouth and told her to tuck in her tail, as it was sticking out from under the mushroom they were hiding beneath. After a while, the monster gave up and left them in peace.
こんなところに一人で来るなんて。うかつな人間ね。ところであなた一人だけなのかしら。
しかしなるほど。
どうしましょう。
なんだ。
人間よ。なんなんですかあれ。
Dolan then explained that the creature was a deranged earth elemental. There used to be humanoid lizards that lived in this swamp, but one day they all disappeared, and that thing was probably the reason. Dolan had heard there was an earthquake some time ago, which had likely affected the elementals. Unfortunately, there was no way to reverse what had happened. Changing the subject, he introduced himself to the lamia, who revealed her name was Celina. Dolan then asked if all lamias could use magic, and she confirmed they could. In that case, the human suggested they team up to fight the elemental, but the woman panicked. Lamias were earth creatures and wouldn't be much help against a monster of the same element, though there was one lamia spell that might work on an earth elemental. Dolan offered to go ahead while she provided support, to which Celina responded, saying she would stand by him in sickness and in health. He chuckled and asked if that wasn't something people said when they got married, to which she apologized for the slip. Then Dolan charged to the front lines while Celina wondered if she could really work with a human she had just met. Regardless, the boy gave the signal and the joint attack began. Dolan deflected the first few earth projectiles the monster threw at him, and Celina seized the opening to curse the opponent with a spell called Jirum, which summoned a colossal serpent that coiled around the enemy and bit its head. However, Celina couldn't hold this magic for long, so the human had to act fast. Knowing this, Dolan rushed at the elemental. Even though the monster managed to shake off the serpent, he dodged the new projectiles, climbed up the creature's head, imbued his sword with draconic magic, and sliced the elemental in half. With the monster defeated, its muddy body spread across the land, splattering Celina and covering her in filth. Dolan checked on her, and after confirming she was fine, extended his hand and invited her to dry off her clothes. Soon they gathered in an abandoned village and cooked a meal. Celina mentioned how the boy hadn't seemed afraid of her, and he replied that she seemed different from the lamias he knew, as they were usually more cautious of humans and, as a result, more aggressive. He then added that there weren't any lamia villages around, so he asked what she was doing in the area. She explained that when Lumius turned 17, there was a rule in their species that they had to go out and find a husband, as they were an exclusively female species. Rarely did they give birth to a boy, and when they did, it was always of the father's race. Lumius had been created when a human woman was cursed, and that curse had been passed down, which is why they were part snake and had venom. As such, they needed husbands who were resistant to this substance. Even her mother had found a human husband, and the two got along very well. Listening calmly, Dolan remarked that Celina was a very adorable Lamia, but she got angry, thinking he was treating her like a child. Dolan laughed at her reaction and served her a portion of food. Celina was so delighted by the taste that she worried she'd gone too far with her praise, which embarrassed her. Easing her nerves, Dolan thanked her for the compliments and mentioned that his mother had taught him how to cook. Celina observed that he smiled gently when talking about his family and suggested he must love them dearly, which triggered a memory of his old life. The solitary dragon in the cave was long gone, and he needed to accept that. At dawn, he said goodbye to Celina, and knowing that Lumius liked vital energy, he shared some of his with her. However, Celina collapsed from the intensity of the dragon's power. After the awkwardness, he helped her up and abandoned the idea. With everything settled, he invited the snake woman to visit his village once she found a husband, and the two parted ways, heading off in separate directions. Some time later, a guard and a civilian from the humble village of Dolan spotted a woman crossing the bridge toward Varun. The civilian remarked that it was dangerous for a young lady to travel alone like that, but she assured him there was no problem after all. She was stronger than she looked. She was just a humble Lamia. Once they realized she was a snake woman, the men fled in a panic, not daring to look back, leaving Celina frustrated by the reception. Meanwhile, back at Dolan's house, Magaru was teaching him and Eri the basics of magical medicine. Unlike regular medicine, magical potions are made from ingredients infused with magic and must be prepared with great caution to be effective. In the worst case, even the smallest mistake could be fatal. Just as she finished explaining this, Dolan made his first error, and the teacher chuckled, commenting that the young man wasn't very good with more delicate tasks. Eri encouraged her brother not to get discouraged, noting that he had a keen eye for medicinal herbs and was great with children. Finally, somewhat shyly, she added that besides all that, he was also handsome. Dolan thanked her for the compliments but admitted he struggled with following complex recipes, acknowledging that he still had a lot to improve. As for Eri's mixture, Magaru found no fault with it, so she sent the girl off to play outside. Eri, however, preferred to help her mother and left once excused. During this time, Dolan reflected that having been a dragon in his past life, he never needed any kind of medicine, which explained why he wasn't skilled with delicate things. Despite the young man's frustration, Magaru assured him that he had first-class offensive magic but was still struggling with magical medicine. Nonetheless, the teacher reminded him that there was no need to rush, there are no shortcuts in life. Dolan had talent, and the obstacles he would face along the way were simply part of the journey to reaching a new level. He recalled a phrase Magaru often said: correct knowledge and small deviations. She reinforced this lesson, planning to teach him how to turn his poisonous failures into antidotes. Later, Dolan went to have lunch at Eri's house after being invited. The girl's father offered a prayer in the name of Myril, the goddess of nature, thanking her for her generosity. During this, Dolan reflected that it had been a long time since he had last seen Myril. After lunch, Dolan hurried off, realizing he had stayed longer than he should have. Before reaching his destination, he was stopped by Miyu, a Boing person. She asked if today wasn't his training day, and he confirmed that he was running late for that very reason. In the end, she offered him some fresh milk, as the semi-human shared her milk with the villagers, who all loved it. Dolan himself confessed that it tasted wonderful but announced that he had to leave. However, Miyu insisted, holding out a mug for him to drink from. After a brief hesitation, he drank it with gusto and then took his leave.
かり長居してしまった。
今日は定期訓練の日じゃないの？それじゃあ飲む暇ないかな。
それで急いでいたんです。アジン種の牛人であるミエさんは村のみんなに提供している。
うめえ。
いや、やはり先を急ぎ。
はい、どうぞ。
いただきます。
Nearby, Christina watched as Dolan hurried across the field. Sometime later, he finally arrived at the training grounds, where 3 younger boys were practicing with spears under Albert's supervision. Dolan apologized for being late, but the teacher wasn't upset. On the contrary, he smiled at his friend and called for a break. The kids quickly gathered around Dolan to show off their spear skills, but the older man told them to come back after the break, leaving the youngsters disappointed. Suddenly, Dolan sensed the presence of a monster nearby. Albert noticed his friend's strange behavior and asked what was going on, but Dolan brushed it off, saying it was nothing. Later that night, Dolan returned to the forest, searching for the source of the feeling that had struck him earlier. In his mind, it was definitely a monster, and possibly a familiar one. Following his senses, he ventured deep into the woods until he spotted Celina bathing. He was startled and nearly hit his head on the ground after stumbling, but Dolan was there to prevent the worst from happening. With everything in order, the man asked what she was doing there, but Celina couldn't speak, feeling too exposed, so she asked him to close his eyes. Dolan didn't understand why, as Celina was such a beautiful woman. and being looked at wouldn't diminish her beauty. Annoyed, the Lamia couldn't comprehend how he could be so indifferent to this. He calmly explained that desiring beautiful things was a natural instinct, and that there was nothing shameful about it. That said, Dolan soon appeared with a handprint on his face, apologizing for his lack of tact, since Celina had gotten even. The man resumed questioning why she was there after all. She had said she was going in search of a husband. Celina admitted that was the plan, but things hadn't gone well so far, so she decided to visit Dolan in his village, as traveling alone was difficult. Dolan was delighted she was there and promised to do everything he could to help her. Speaking of which, he came up with the brilliant idea that they should live together, which left Celina in a state of panic. After recovering from the shock, she asked if he was serious, given that she was a monster. Dolan explained that in his village there were many beast people and demi-humans. While the villagers might be wary of Celina because she was a Lamia, her powers and kind personality would surely win their trust, allowing her to live peacefully in Verun. Surprised, Celina hadn't imagined she could befriend humans. Dolan then confessed that her presence would make his life much more pleasant. Reflecting on his own words, Dolan wondered why it felt like he was courting this maiden. However, regardless, the invitation had already been extended and duly accepted by the girl. Speaking of which, Celina confessed that she had another reason for seeking out the human. In truth, she hoped he could share a bit of his life energy with her, as she had never felt such a delicious energy that made her feel so good. On this matter, Dolan assured her that as soon as they started living together, Celina would have whatever she wanted. He then extended his hand to seal the deal with the Lamia. As soon as she responded to the gesture, he transferred a little of his life energy to her as a free demonstration, and the poor thing got excited from the tip of her tail to the tips of her ears. With that done, Dolan explained his plan to Celina. The next day, the captain and a few subordinates assessed the third consecutive day of mysterious attacks on the village, where animals were killed and left behind, along with a strange sunken trail in the ground. Regarding this, they believed the culprit might be that half-human, half-creature shadow they saw last night, in other words, a Lamia, an extremely dangerous being feared by humans. What the captain couldn't understand was why she left her prey in the village instead of taking it to eat. Without delay, the officer warned the village elders about the threat lurking in the territory. Everyone wanted to understand why a Lamia appeared in this region, as it rarely happened. Captain Verone suggested forming a squad to eliminate the creature once and for all. However, one of the leaders pointed out that the village had too few people and it would be too risky. Therefore, they needed to request reinforcements from the capital, which meant sending a messenger immediately. Meanwhile, Dolan overheard the conversation while working with Albert, gathering wood, reflecting on how deep the divide between humans and monsters was. To him, it was sad to think that a woman like Celina, so kind and gentle, would be hated by people just for being who she was. Back at the meeting, Magaru urged everyone not to panic and acknowledged that Verun was deeply concerned for the village. Still, she explained that the Lamia was probably leaving the animals as offerings to the village and suggested they should try to understand why. At that moment, Eri arrived at the meeting with the results of the divination suggested by Magaru. The elder carefully examined the strange pot and concluded that Eri had reached the same outcome as her. In other words, the divination predicted that the appearance of the serpent was a good omen, and everyone should wait to see what happens. Hearing this, Dolan celebrated the decision and rushed back to Celina. At the end of the day, knowing he could now move forward with the final part of his plan, upon reaching her, he informed Celina that the offering plan had worked and then explained the next step. The following day, Verone explained to the other soldiers that a Lamia had been spotted in the area, so a new training session would be held that day to keep everyone sharp in case something happened. The children were captivated by the captain's imposing presence, especially Toro, his son. Meanwhile, Dolan pondered that this was the core of Verun's defense, and these were the people who would help with the final part of his plan with Celina, including the captain, the lieutenant, and even the priestess Letitia, who could use healing miracles and antidotes. However, since she was considered a messenger of the goddess Myril, Dolan needed to be careful not to make her see Celina as a threat, as that would mean the end for her. In any case, the rest was now up to the Lamia. Knowing this, the poor thing trembled in fear.
聞いていると思うが、だが野外定期訓練を実施する。
なんせ俺の弟だからな。
我ら辺境の民は
村の主なメンツがほぼ集まってんな。
作戦の仕上げには助かるメンバーでもある駐在兵隊長のバランさんと第一母神マイラールの新幹戦士、その副長マリーダさん。彼女の言葉は神の代弁。頼むぞセリナ、迎え入れることができる。
The night before, Dolan had planned for her to save him during training in the burrowing rabbit territory, as he would purposely enter the animal's den and then give the signal to be rescued by Celina. However, despite the plan, a guard came rushing during the training to report that an armored bear was approaching. Without delay, the gigantic beast appeared in a fury. Verun ordered no one to attack, as a blow from the beast could cut a human in half. The problem was that Toro was defenseless and very close to the bear. Dolan quickly sprang into action, jumping on the boy to prevent a tragedy. At the same time, Celina suddenly appeared, jumping onto Dolan to shield him from the beast's claws. In response, the Lamia cast a spell on the bear, ordering it to return to the forest, stunning everyone as the beast obediently followed her command. After getting rid of the bear, Celina asked if Toro was okay, but the captain doubted the Lamia's intentions and threatened her. Dolan argued that she had saved him, and Melita agreed. Still, Varun remained suspicious. He questioned why the Lamia had been leaving offerings in the village and why she had saved Dolan and Toro. Celina explained that she had saved them because their families would be heartbroken if they died. With that, Celina bowed and pleaded to be allowed to live in the village, explaining that her father was human and had always loved her mother. Upon hearing this, Varun asked Letitia for her opinion. The priestess received a message from the goddess Myril, stating that the Lamia before them was not a threat and that everyone should live in harmony. She then approached Celina and noted that the creature was keeping her eyes closed to calm the human fear of curses. But she gently asked the young Lamia to open her eyes because everything was alright. However, Celina was gravely injured and ended up fainting. After some time, Celina recovered and was given a house to live in. When she visited her new home, she was touched by the kindness she received from the villagers. There was even a plush mushroom inside the house, an idea suggested by Captain Varun himself. Speaking of him, Varun apologized for pointing his weapon at the Lamia, as she had saved his son's life. Eri asked Celina to share everything she knew about her species so they could learn how to take better care of her. Similarly, Celina wished to learn all she could about the human race. Finally, Dolan pretended not to know the serpent and extended his hand as a greeting. She cried and responded to his gesture, and with that, Dolan welcomed Celina to Veron Village. This is the end of Goodbye Dragon Life Episode 2. Thank you so much for staying on this channel and watching our videos. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel so we can keep you updated with our latest content. See you in the next video.